Good morning, people of the internet. You are listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank, 1 minute at a time. I am one of your co-hosts, Dev.
And I'm the other co-host, Hugh. And on today's show, we're looking at minute 105 as the credits roll and we discuss the various names on screen. It's time for the stunt team to take a bow.
Yes, indeed. Right from the get-go, we have the stunt team showing up and quite a roster of fairly well-known names in the stunt community. Buddy Joe Hooker and William H. Hooker, David Welch, Ronnie Rondell, and Greg Harris, all like pretty well-known stunt actors as well. It was a good, solid team, I think.
So, what does today's guest say?
Oh my goodness. I don't know stunt people things.
Oh, fair enough. No, I was just trying to cue Devin to remembering to introduce you. Sorry.
Oh,
well, there is also that. I got carried away.
It's okay. I just thought I'd give you a cue in, and it didn't work. I failed miserably.
I'll reinsert it, and it'll sound like I'm not a complete fucking moron.
The lack of subtlety on my part.
I'm not used to you diving straight into content of the minute.
I do, but I've done that. I'm the one who started adding that to the scripts when we started.
I know. I mean,
it's a good thing this is the last episode, and you're still not used to it.
Well, there's no point in me adjusting now, is there, Hugh?
Fair point.
Joining us on today's show, we do, of course, have Catch You Later, GPB fan extraordinaire, back once again. Hey, Catch.
This is bananas that this is the last one.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah. We have 2 more minutes after this, but some inside baseball, we've already recorded those 2 minutes. So this is our last recorded episode. Super exciting. And we have kind of the top of the credits. We've gone through the main cast. We do have the 4 assassins also credited here, who are Grosse's buddies that are running and juking and diving and getting shot up in the house at the end. Bobby Bass, Lance Gilbert, Pete Antico, and Lawrence Bilzerian. I mean, they didn't get a whole lot of screen time, but it was fun screen time when they were on. Hugh, you want to talk a little bit more about the stunt actors that we have in this?
Sure. I mean, stunt coordinator for the film is legend in his lifetime in Hollywood cinema, which is Buddy Joe Hooker. The list it's 210 credits just for stunts on IMDb before we even look at his credits as a second unit director.
Wow.
And he started out way back when it comes to this is for the proper hardcore cinephiles, but this is a guy who started in '67 on Game People Play, but then did stuff like Hell's Angels, The Omega Man, Harold and Maude, Melinda, White Lightning, Blazing Saddles, which is probably one of the most well-known, was around. He was stunt coordinator on the TV movie that kicked off Wonder Woman, Coppola's The Conversation, but then also Blaxploitation like 3 The Hard Way. I mean, there's a list of films that I've either seen or own or want to see, including a film I just bought recently, which is a horror flick called Messiah of Evil. But yeah, he, worked for people like Spielberg in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And then, just amazing career, all sorts of stuff, proper old school. And I just think it's interesting that they went old school. I think it says a lot that he kind of comes from an era where you drove the car and figured out how to flip it and get yourself out safely, and you threw the punch and you didn't mind, you tried to make sure it didn't land, but and he also didn't mind moving between TV and film, right? Like he did First Blood, and he also helped work on Hill Street Blues, he and V. So he's that kind of guy. So I think it's interesting that that's the guy they got in. This is a demonstration, I think, of Cusack as a producer going, we want quality. We want, I'm starting at the top, I mean, in the 2 years before, sorry?
And possibly an influence of Benny Urquidez as well, right? Who had been
Possibly,
working
yeah.
for a while now, and probably had a good line on stunt actors that he was not just enjoyed working with, but was willing to work with, right? Because you want to ensure that they are people that you trust and can work with in a safe manner. So
yeah, I mean, he just done. I mean, yeah, God, I think I saw almost everything he worked on or in that time period. It's like, the Crow, The Shadow, Terminal Velocity, The Hunted, Waterworld, Jade, From Dusk Till Dawn, The Arrival, Executive Decision, Mulholland Falls, and Star Trek: First Contact. That's literally the last 6 or 7 before Grosse Pointe Blank.
Yeah,
and then he goes off to do Batman and Robin. Like, what a career, right? That's insane. Just like, yeah, I'll do indie. Oh yeah, I'll go do big majors. Oh yeah, I'll do this. Just the guy is properly looking at that. What I perceive as somebody who is democratic in his choices, right? This is a guy who goes where the work is interesting, not just where the money is. And I think that's admirable. The last credit he's got is on that Netflix film Free Guy that Ryan Reynolds did, where he's the turns out he's the NPC in the video game. So he's just done that, and now he's on the next Coppola that's coming along. He was on as well. So I love these guys. I think it's amazing that these people are around. These are the sort of people we should have had the Oscar for stunt work for. These are the kind of people that deserve that recognition and don't get.
It's interesting because it is, the stunt acting community is a relatively small community, I feel. And there's it's one of those things that you will see the same names over and over and over again. One name that stood out to me is Greg Harris, who this was one of the first films he did, but he's gone on to do Speed 2, Soldier, Meet Joe Black, Coyote Ugly, all the way through Too Fast, Too Furious, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, The Dark Knight. You've got, Night and Day, X-Men First Class, Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar, in Kingsman, Knives Out, Tenet, Spider-Man No Way Home. It's a long list of big action movies that he's been in. And the other thing I would do is I'd plug a fantastic podcast called, I'm gonna have to get this the right way round because it's very bad if you don't, Cunning Stunts. Which is a phenomenal podcast and interviews a ton of different stunt actors and stunt coordinators, and it's well worth listening to because they really give you an insight, and it's got a British spin on it, so it's a lot of the British stunt acting community, but that is also like a fairly influential element of Hollywood stunt acting as well. A lot of British stunt actors will go over there.
In that case, I'll just add one other plug, which is my friend John Sparrow, who is a British filmmaker based out of Oxford. He's got a book out called Videosyncratic, which is his memoirs of working in the VHS days, because he started as the kid behind the counter and worked his way up to owning a chain. So he's now turned that into a book, and the book is actually published in VHS size, which is just brilliant.
Cool.
with a VHS style cover. Anyway, he's made several. I first met him when he was working on his first film because he works on documentary stuff, and he was putting together this massive history of Elstree Studios, and it while they were getting it together, they're having difficulty funding the whole thing, and he ended up using all of that footage to do a documentary called 1976. Because that was the year that you had like Star Wars, but also a whole bunch of other big movies all working in England at the same time for the first time. And he's since done several other documentaries. And his last big documentary was called British Bulldogs, and it's about the British stuntmen, the history of British stuntmen, and how we got them in the first place. So it goes. It's the key interviewees are a guy who I can't remember the name of because he's the oldest one there, but he's the guy who came out of the army in World War II, having learned martial arts while he was stationed in Asia, and he got hired to work with the what's her name? I've got to get my names right now. Honor Blackman on the Avengers, and then Diana Rigg. He's the guy who literally brought judo to London. But there's still more to uncover. I think there's a whole bunch of people who are there's still stories that I don't think have reached final cut in a bunch of documentaries, and I'd love to hear more from some of them. In particular, I don't think anyone's done a good documentary on the history of female stuntmen or stunt women. Sorry,
Yeah,
because there's so many of them over the years, and you ask someone to name the most famous ones, and you're not going to get a big list, And yet, every time that Minnie Driver's doubled, there's somebody doing it,
Yeah, and also, I mean, the other thing that I've heard is, obviously, because you're costumed to match the character you're playing, right? In a lot of these sequences, stunt women often just aren't able to wear padding in the same way that stuntmen are, because
in the early days, yeah, absolutely,
the costume, the wardrobe just doesn't allow for it, and it's it's still depressingly fairly true. So those knocks come that much harder because there isn't the padding to absorb them.
And one thing that is fun about the modern era is the fact that almost all the stunt people, younger stunt people who I find interesting, are on Instagram. So they'll show you exactly what they're doing. They show you how they do it, but also you get to see them. You get to see shots of them with their actors, and so who did it. And I think that's a really great thing, that they don't have to wait till they're old and being asked questions while they're staggering around on their injuries. Vic Armstrong was the name of the guy I was trying to remember.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, absolute stone cold legend in the business.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think there's a whole bunch of them on Insta. Many of them worth following. I'm trying to remember the name of the lady who's doubled Charlize Theron several times. She's on there, and anyway, but yeah, I mean, in this modern era, people often think, especially post Jackie Chan, people are always like, oh, all these actors get trained to do the thing for themselves, and it's like, actually, no, they do it if it's insurable. And if it's not, it's like the amount, even, I mean, people don't, despite the way they sold them to America, Jackie Chan has stuntmen and uses stuntmen. And actually, now that we're getting better editions of his films, you can often spot it now if you're looking carefully, because there are things that, like, he does super dangerous things, but because of that, he couldn't get his own. Insurance. He had to found his own insurance company for his own stuntmen in Hong Kong. But because of that, there has to be lines drawn, because as he's gotten bigger and become the draw in Japan, in America, they can't. He has to take less risks whether he likes it or not. Well, we've talked about Kathy Nielsen at length across this podcast.
Yes.
One last shout out to her.
Absolutely.
Absolute queen, as we've discovered, hugely important across the entirety of the 80s and 90s in terms of the greatest soundtracks we can all name. And in terms of music and licensing, the amount of Gordian knots she must have broken to get certain things on tape so that it can be heard in the film is just phenomenal. This was minute 105 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your co-hosts, co-writers, and co-producers, Sodagar and myself, Hugh David.
Catch You Later has been our guest all of this week. Where can we find you and the stuff you're doing?
I don't know. Haunting a closet somewhere.
Wow.
But besides that, North Bay Derby and Cacciatore Reviews. Those are two things you can actually see.
Fantastic. You can find us on all good podcast players, as well as YouTube, X, and Spotify. We are at Debi Radio, and our website, debiradio.com. And all of those, Debi is spelled D-E-B-I.
And finally, it'll still be up even after the episodes are down. Talk with us on the Facebook listeners group, Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't